This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time of day it is for you right now. Today's episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast is a short solo episode for a nice change, where I discuss a topic that I've come across a lot recently and appears to be rising. That is social approval. This is where athletes worry too much about what other people think of them, and as a consequence, their confidence fluctuates and their focus is questionable. The vast majority of people that I support want to improve their performance levels. They want to compete more consistently in a competitive space. And this is natural, as is wanting to be liked, you could argue too. And often what I hear is that athletes, especially younger athletes, are out to impress team managers, coaching staff, fans, spectators, teammates, scouts, friends, family, and of course their parents. So this episode is for you if you fall into that category, or maybe your son or daughter does, or if you're a coach who notices this in your athletes or players. The athlete who's always trying to seek social approval is likely to mean that they're going to put on far too much pressure on themselves, and they're going to be easily distracted on occasions. If I go back to my youth and in my early 20s, as a reasonably talented amateur golfer, I'd get very nervous before matches or competitions, and from the moment I took my golf clubs out of the car and started walking down to the putting green or to the first tee in clubhouse, especially in bigger tournaments or on away courses, I'd be mind reading. I'd be worrying what people thought I looked like. If I looked good, you could arguably say I was a little bit vain at that time, but I just really wanted to fit in and not stand out. An example would be, it could have been a really, really hot sunny day. And I can remember one tournament in particular. It was at Eagles Cliff Golf Club in the Teesside area. It was a lovely golf course, and it was a Durham County event, which was 36 holes. And that day it was very hot, it was humid, and it would have been really sensible of me to have worn a cap or a hat to protect my head. But no, I cared too much what people thought I looked like, and worried about that. So I was fortunate enough to be off early when it was relatively cool, at least to start with. And I got off to a good start. Then, of course, the sun got out, it warmed up. And sure enough, because I wouldn't wear a hat, my round deteriorated. I became uncomfortable in the heat, had some headaches, was a little dehydrated, and it cost me a few shots easily. Then I had to go out again and play another round. This time it was at the hottest part of the day, around lunchtime, and I was terrible. I felt terrible. Looking back, I probably had sunstroke, which so easily could have been avoided. That day I could have easily saved myself 10 shots if I'd simply worn a hat. Yet, in my mind, I would have stood out by wearing a hat. And also, what was in my mind, which is a little bit crazy when I look back now, I blame my golf swing for the fact that I didn't perform. And it wasn't my golf swing. It was just that decision, really, of not wearing a hat. Yes, I wouldn't have won the tournament, but I would have performed an awful lot better. And on the subject of the golf swing, this again was something, my tendency was to think that it needed to look perfect. It needed to look good so that people would compliment me on it and compliment me on the good shots. And, this is something I see an awful lot. It's very, very common. We fear negative comments from other people about what we look like, whether that's just personally or whether it's actually the sort of technical side to our sport. And certainly from what I see now, especially in youngsters, my belief is social media has ramped this up, where youngsters are a lot more impressionable than they used to be. I'd say at present, probably around about 70% of my sporting clients play football. And you often see players, they're working out in the gym so that they look good and to impress others, rather than strengthening their body to prevent injury, to increase speed or strength and become better players. And on the pitch, you're likely to see them worrying about disappointing teammates or coaches if they make a bad pass, miss a shot, on goal or lose possession, and the spotlight is then shone on them. There's links to fear of failure for sure. If I consider things I often hear, they would be things like, when I make a mistake like losing the ball, my body language can be awful. If I do it a few times, I really struggle and get upset with myself. I often go on to hide in spaces, watching the game pass me by. I'll go quiet, I'll not ask for the ball. I really struggle with this. I'm really frightened about the coach's reaction if I make a mistake, and it's just so easy to disappear from the game. It really eats me up, it frustrates me, and players want to know how they can stop this. And I will go on to offer some advice there. When you think about it, this player in particular that I've just mentioned there with my comments of what they would likely say is probably stuck in the past. They're catastrophizing about mistakes potentially and the things that they shouldn't be doing, or they're in the future. They're trying to predict what is going to happen in the game and potentially making more mistakes, and then worrying about what the coach is going to say and potentially being criticized, or again, they might be worrying about what their teammates are going to say. So the key is to recognize this, and it's to try and be present. It's to try and accept that worrying about what other people think is normal, that you're not some sort of weirdo for doing this. We all do that. We all fall into this trap from time to time. I often call it judgment mode, often where people begin to judge themselves, judge their performance levels. And they also go on to think about how others are going to judge them and how others are going to respond to them. They'll likely think, I wonder if the coach is going to go crazy in the dressing room later and pull me in front of the lads. What's my social media going to look like after making that mistake? How much abuse am I going to have to put up with? My dad and brother are going to give me loads of stick now if I don't start playing better. I really hope the scouts didn't see me do that. So some advice. Be aware that social approval is dangerous. It can seriously hurt your performances. And if you throw in some negative thinking and what I would call a can't-do attitude and perfectionism, you'll likely experience a whole lot more pressure, potentially fear, tension, and then self-criticism is going to follow. And all of this is going to distract you from doing what you're good at. If you're a footballer, it's likely going to mean that you're going to make poor decisions on the pitch. You're going to rush passes. You might even look lost. So here's a tip so that you can take some control and play more freely and stop mind reading other people. So it starts with self-awareness, which is something I've talked about an awful lot on this podcast, and is often the case in our work as sports psychologists. The key is to recognize when you are falling into these traps, when you are mind reading other people. So ask yourself the following questions. Do I mind read what the manager or coach is looking for? Do I mind read in the changing room what I look like? Do I mind read when others are watching me play football? Do I mind read after I make a mistake? Do I mind read when I see other people's reactions to things that I do? I've come across scenarios where very good footballers, professional footballers at the highest level, may be thinking, what would a mate do here? An example is when a friend was playing on loan in a higher division and doing really, really well, and the person themselves was struggling, they'd start comparing themselves to that friend. And before you know it, they're not concentrating on their game. Jealousy, envy would take over, and they're trying to be someone else with the sole mission of trying to impress that person, but also impress coaches and teammates, new teammates. So again, self-awareness is the key, and acceptance is a key word in this as well. It is normal. Accept that it's normal, that it's healthy, and then look to change your approach and realize that you can change your approach. Some people feel that they're quite helpless in this respect, but I can reassure you, you're certainly not. So also I'd encourage you to understand why it is you get drawn into this thought process. Why is it that you worry so much about what other people think when you do play? What's it costing you? And are there actually some benefits from this? So now consider another 4 questions. Are you looking to avoid embarrassment? Is it that you want to gain other people's approval? And who is that? Do you want to impress other people with your skills? So is it your ego taking over? Do you use football or your sport to make you feel good and then gain respect from other people? So once you've got a handle on this and you understand more why you do mind read, why you do worry about what other people think of you, you can start making some better decisions and respond better in different situations. And another little tip here, a process I would really consider to follow is the 3 R's process. It's to recognize, to regroup, and then to refocus. So I'll give you a practical situation here. Let's consider a match, a football match. So you recognize that you're drifting into space again, you're hiding, you're not asking for the ball. That's the first part of the R's, to recognize. Then we're going to regroup. So you use your own self-talk. You say to yourself in a nice, sort of kind tone, an encouraging tone, it's okay, forget the last few minutes, let's get busy again, let's make it really difficult for my opponent. So here you're instructing yourself on what it is that you need to do. I call it instructional mode. And then lastly, the 3rd R is refocus. So you now take action. You start to make the runs into good areas. You cause your opponent's headaches. You improve your communication with your teammates. So, this is a starting point to help you become more aware of why and when you worry about others and the impact it has on your game and what you can do about it. Something else you might want to consider is sitting down with your friends that you trust, and ask them about the sort of things they think in game situations and what they think about you when you play well or poorly, when you make mistakes. What is it that they notice about you? It's a relatively easy task, and it will allow you to be more honest with yourself, which is absolutely vital. And it's going to give you a much better chance of learning from past mistakes, which is a key part of mental toughness. I sincerely hope that you've enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast. Feel free to check out our Facebook group, the Sports Psychology Hub, where I've also added in different ideas to help you deal with social approval this week. Take care and have a great week. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sports psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.